Waiting. Waiting for news about Dad. He's been in the hospital for days now, fighting the deadly COVID virus. We can't even see him. We can't talk to him. All we must do is wait for the doctor to tell us something, anything. The waiting is agonizing. The phone rings. Panic. My heart races as I grab it. It's just someone trying to get me to upgrade my cell phone contract. Waiting. More waiting. The hours and days. Filling my time. I seem to be in a nowhere land. A message from the doctor. Tomorrow we might try and reduce his oxygen to see how he responds. Good news. Relief. Waiting. Time passes. A missed call. Panic. Who called? Minutes later, another call. It's my brother. I quickly grab the phone. I can't hear what he's saying. He's crying. What? I asked, fear coursing through my body, my heart pounding. What's happened? He calms. Dad's taken a turn for the worse. We need to make some decisions. Icy fear stabs at my heart. He needs to go on a ventilator to survive, the doctor says. What do you want to do? Of course, get him on the ventilator. At least then he has a chance. Pain, despair. The phone rings again. Worry again surges through me as I answer it. It's the doctor at the hospital. I'm with your dad. However, he doesn't want the ventilator. He says we should rather give it to someone else. What do you want us to do? Shock, anguish, fear. My mind is a blur. He doesn't want the ventilator. His only chance of survival, he's giving it away. A miracle. The doctor arranges for us to enter the heart of the war zone, where people are fighting for their lives in high care. An opportunity to see Dad. Oxygen hisses as he battles to breathe. He points at the drawer next to his bed as my brother and I walk in. My wallet. I get it. Get money. Use my card. Give it. He gasps as he instructs us to give his money to people who need it. Caring. He asks about other sick people. He praises for others, prays for the sick. We leave. Worry, waiting. One of the hardest places to be is in this terrible waiting, this agonizing between life and death, between knowing and not knowing, between the beginning and the end. Yet for all of us at some stage in life, we find ourselves here, uncertain of what to do, uncertain of what will happen, sometimes even uncertain what to pray. It's an anxious place, an uncomfortable place, a place we would rather not be, but it's the place where we meet God. For thousands of years, the Jewish nation lived in a simple world of clear-cut laws defined by a long list of thou shalt and thou shalt not. There was not much need to struggle with these laws, as most grey areas were removed by more laws. Yet along came Jesus, saying, I have come not to destroy the law, but fulfill the law, leaving us not in the clear-cut realm of the law, but somewhere beyond and between. In fact, when a lawyer challenged Jesus to summarize all of the Bible's teachings, he said the following: love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. The ultimate divine commandment sits between us loving God, unseen, and loving our neighbor, seen. Between loving ourselves, which comes naturally, and loving our neighbor, which is unnatural to us. In this between lies our calling. However, as humans, we prefer certainty. We prefer clear instructions. We're not comfortable with the seemingly vague and fuzzy between. And so it's no surprise that the lawyer who had asked Jesus this question is not satisfied with his answer. And so we read, but he, wanting to justify himself, asked Jesus, "And so who's my neighbor?" He wants clarity, certainty about who is this neighbor that he must love. Jesus then tells the very well-known story of what we now call the parable of the Good Samaritan. It's a story of a traveler who gets mugged and is left dying on the roadside. A priest and a Levite both see him, but walk past, simply ignoring him. Finally, a Samaritan, considered an outcast to the Jewish people, then helps him and cares for him. And so we might finish the story thinking, the lesson is that our neighbor is whoever we meet who is in need. And this is true. But this is not the lesson Jesus is seeking to teach. Jesus is addressing something far more important. This story is not about the object, the injured man, or the subject, the Samaritan, but about the action, the verb that happens between them, and that is love. The lawyer wanted a clear definition of the object he should love. Yet in the story, Jesus not only confounds his notion of who the subject is, the one loving is a despised Samaritan, but he concludes with an unexpected question that changes the entire answer. Which of these three do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers? Jesus asks. The lawyer had asked Jesus the question, "Who is my neighbor?" And Jesus answers with, "Who was neighborly?" There is no subject and object. There are two neighbors. The very concept of a neighbor only exists in relation to another neighbor. This is about loving, not finding the object to love. All too often we can be fixated on the needy we love rather than on the love we should be sharing and developing. Love is not about the subject or the object, it's the verb that connects them. It is here, between neighbors, between God and us, that we experience and live what Jesus called the greatest command. And by the way, where did the Samaritan enact and experience love? But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, we read. As he traveled, he was between places, and that is where love is experienced. That is where God is found. So where will we find God in our need? Where can we meet God when we are desperate for help? Thousands of years ago, God told Moses where he would meet him. Moses had built a tabernacle, a tent version of a temple, and inside it was a place called the Holy Place, and beyond that was another area called the Holy of Holies. Inside here was only one thing, the Ark of the Covenant. This box-like structure was a symbol of God to the people. It was made of pure gold and had two cherubim on top of it, stretching their wings toward each other. And we read, "I will meet with you there and talk to you from above the atonement cover, between the gold cherubim that hover over the Ark of the Covenant." This is where God would meet Moses, between the cherubim on the ark. God's meeting place has always been between. The place between certainties, between knowing which way to go, between answers, between life choices, between faith and works. between mercy and truth, between life and death. It is here, in our uncertainty, that God is truly found. Why does God want to meet us between? It's because in the between we are moving. We are not stationary. Whenever we are between, we are moving because we are trying to get somewhere. Whether you are between jobs or between points in a hike, this is not a place where we stop, but a place of motion. And so it's no coincidence that the first century Christian church was called the Way. They were on the move. They were being persecuted for their faith. They were literally running for their lives. Yet here, in the Way, they would meet God. In fact, one of the first and most beautiful encounters with the risen Jesus happens while two people are walking from Jerusalem to a small village called Emmaus. As they talked and discussed these things with each other, they're talking about the recent crucifixion of Jesus, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them. This is an absolutely stunning story as Jesus speaks to their needs and pain and concerns, and they don't even realize it is him until they share some bread together in a meal later on. And then we read, their eyes were open and they recognized him, and he disappeared from their sight. And then they exclaim, were not our hearts burning within us while he talked with us on the road and opened the scriptures to us? This is the place where we can meet Jesus. In our pain, in our suffering, in our worry, in our uncertainty. Yet like them, we need to pray that our eyes may be opened, for he comes to comfort and ignite a flame of love in our hearts like never before. The message of the Bible is very clear when it comes to where we find God. From the first book of Genesis to the last book of Revelation, we keep coming across stories where God is met in the between. From the Old Testament story about Jacob, who's on the run from his angry brother who wants to kill him, meeting God at a place he would after call Bethel, or the house of God, where he has a dream of a ladder reaching to heaven, to the New Testament story about Saul, who would later have his name changed to Paul, who's headed out to persecute the Christian church. And he meets Jesus on the road to Damascus and is blinded and finally converted. God is always found in the between. Jesus tells us a story about a boy who desperately wanted his father's inheritance, even before he died. And he gets it, and then promptly goes and wastes it all on crazy living, and soon finds himself destitute and having to live in a pigsty, starving as he eats the food the pigs eat just to survive. And in our lives, we sometimes find ourselves in the worst of conditions possible, whether this is because of our choices or tragedy. It's the depth of despair. Yet the son does not want to stay here. He wants to get back to his father. And so we read, when he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I'll set out and go back to my father. Meanwhile, his father has been looking out for him for years, waiting desperately for him to return. And so we read, so the son got up and went to his father, but while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son and threw his arms around him and kissed him. This lost and despairing child is met by his Father in the between the trough and the table. And so while we may feel like we are in the worst place possible, let's take courage, get up and walk towards our Father, and he will run out to meet us and throw his arms around us. And as a guarantee, in case we are in any doubt where God can be found, he's given us a huge visual reminder. He's placed a mega billboard across the sky for us to see and always remember. As we read in Genesis, "And the rainbow shall be in the cloud, and I will look upon it, that I may remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is upon the earth." And so when you see a rainbow, know that it is an incredible sign. We can't see where it starts or where it ends, just like our times of pain and suffering. Yet we can certainly see its beauty and know with certainty that God is with us in our between. May God bless and keep you. Amen.